Hello, welcome to this episode of Ready to Paint. This time we're going to be painting a still life together. It's going to be a lot of fun. Hello, and welcome to another episode of Ready to Paint. I hope you've had a good week, and this episode we're going to try something that I've done very little of so far, and that is still life. And still life represents a number of challenges. I think the main one is one of tone and judging tones within the painting. If you don't know what tone is, imagine you take a photograph in black and white of the scene, and what you're looking at in the black and white picture is the tones of the photograph, tones of the scene. Often when we see things in colour, it's much harder for our eyes to detect different tones. And I'll share just a good way of helping with that as you do the painting. But for now, we're going to be using oils again. Grab your brushes and let's get ready to paint. And here's the actual scene we're going to be painting today. You'll see it's not sort of a lot of variance, a lot of variation in the colour, but it makes a really, I think, a lovely painting. Now let's look at the actual paints that we're going to have. I've squeezed out some titanium white. This is called flake white, and it's like a sort of like a gentler white, and it mixes really nicely, and it's slightly less harsh than the titanium white. This is bismuth yellow, very strong, cool yellow. This is Winsor yellow, which is a warmer yellow. This is cadmium yellow deep. It's like a very, very warm orange. It's orangey brown. And then cadmium red, very strong, powerful red colour. Some ultramarine blue. And then these two ones in the end here, they are ones I've mixed. Do you remember from the last video we talked about a chromatic black? So this is 60% ultramarine blue, 40% burnt umber. And this one is sort of not quite as black as that, and it's about 50-50 ultramarine and burnt umber. So it looks slightly browner, but only slight. Anyway, these are the colours we'll be using. So let's start marking out our board. We're going to start drawing, first of all, sketching out the scene that we've got. The beer bottle, the Italian coffee pot, and the lemon cut in half. And for that, I just mix just a small amount of diluted of the 50-50 ultramarine blue and burnt umber, and I dilute it quite a lot because I don't want to see this at the end of the painting. This is just to guide me as I sketch it out. And what we're looking at here is, where I try and think of it is, don't just paint a coffee pot, a beer bottle and a lemon. Paint the shapes that you see. So in a sense, don't think of yourself as painting those objects. Think of yourself as painting the shapes that compose those objects. And then you'll find that the objects then appear. Okay? And that goes the same when we're painting them. And I'll talk a bit more about that when we get to that stage. But for now, let's start doing some sketching. One thing I should mention is on this is the board that I'm painting on is 3mm MDF, and I've painted it white. I primed it with a white primer, and then I've stained it, so we're not painting onto a stark white background, and that helps later on when we start trying to do the tones and getting the initial paint down onto the board. Something I find really helpful is the idea of positive dialogue. And by that, when you draw something or you're painting and you think, oh, this is rubbish, I just haven't got this right, instead of going down that route, start asking yourself questions. Things like, is that line straight or is it sloping? Where is it in proportion to some of the other shapes? What are some of the big shapes that I'm looking at? Or if you're painting, things like, is that lighter or darker? Is that a warmer or a cooler colour? What is that like in relation to the lemons, for example? How dark is that beer bottle? Just so questions rather than statements saying what you think of your painting. And your painting will then evolve. Anyway, I'm going to crack on with this and I'll see you in a moment. So I've sketched out using diluted paint the scene, the coffee pot, and the lemon and the beer bottle. Here it is. Don't worry if you're going through this and you're copying. Don't worry if it's not exactly as you see. Make sure the main proportions are correct, because you won't see any of these marks afterwards. We're going to be painting over those, but make sure the main pieces are in the right place. So take your time to get the angles and the lines right, but don't worry if it's not completely precise, because you won't see it in the final painting. Let's mix up some paint. I'm going to do the background first here. I find with still life, what I found is it's really helpful to paint a section around the objects that we're going to be painting. And this will help enormously in judging the tones of the object. And I think what we'll do now is we'll mix up some paint and we'll do the background, and then I will start to fill in parts of these what's called the blocking in. So putting in the main bits of colour without regard to detail, and we'll put in the detail as we go later on. One of the things I thought I'd do actually just before I paint the outside is just to put a little bit of shadow in places where there are shadow, like the lights and darks. So I've mixed up some ultramarine blue mainly and some of the black, and I'm just going to place it where there are some dark sections in the painting, and this will help to create the form that I need. So it'll show me the three-dimensional quality of these things that we're painting. So there's a little bit up there. This bit is going to be it's dark, but it's not all in shadow. We'll come to that detail in a little bit. This section, a handle, is obviously dark. I'm just sort of blocking in. I'm not looking for any detail at all. Just putting on this mixture of blue. One way which helps is if you squint, and you'll see the colour will be removed a little bit from the scene, and you can then see where those dark shapes and patterns are. I'm not painting this a bottle or a coffee or a lemon. I'm purely painting where there are dark sections in that scene. And this will help to give it more form. Sort of like that. It's not perfect, but it just gives an idea of where some of those colours or tones are to change. And I also realise I haven't done this top of the coffee pot quite correctly. It's these lines here need to come in more, but I'll do that when I do the blocking in of the colour behind the scene. I can nudge those down a little bit. But I think that's helped me to see where some of the lighter and darker pieces of the painting are. And that's the point of this exercise, to focus my mind, your mind, if you're trying this for yourself as well, on where the lights and the darks are. I'm just seeing there's also a very dark section in there, in between those two lemons, and also on that part. So I could have gone darker, but that's okay. That's okay. I can go darker once I've put in the background, but I think that's a useful exercise in looking at tone And while we go on, I'll show you a tip where you take a photograph using your mobile phone, taking it in black and white, and looking at it in black and white will really help you to spot where those dark and lights sit. And that's what I'm going to do now. So what I've done is to take a photograph here in black and white, and if I hold it up here you can see, compare it with the same scene in colour, black and white, and I find, and you may find as well, that the black and white one really shows much more, things like this bottle, how dark that is, the blacks of the handle, but also look at the different faces of the two lemons. One is much darker and one is much lighter, and it also shows, highlights the shadows. Just let me go back again to the colour version. So it suddenly shows where those tones are, and that's really helpful for reference as we go to the next stage. Alright, I've now mixed the colours for the background, and I'm going to work around the objects I've put in place, keeping in mind for the background where the shadow is. And it's this sort of biscuity colour, and the two panels, the one on this side is darker than the one on this side. So I'm going to paint the darker colour first, and I'm going to move it up there. That's about right. Checking the tone as you go. Checking the tone as you go. And I'm working through here. And I said I'm going to nudge this slightly, the edge of this part of the coffee pot, because it's not quite right. Now that's the darkest section on that face, and then there are also some darker bits around here. But if I look, they're not quite as dark, so I'm going to lighten them, lighten it a bit further, and put in some around here, and some behind the handle here. And then some down here. So I'm deliberately, I'm not trying to draw the thing, I'm drawing the light and painting the light and the dark section. And then what I hope is going to happen is that the painting will sort of jump, pop, and you'll start seeing the various shapes. Got the dark bit under the lemon there as well. And I think this bit, because it gets slightly lighter, quite good practice working in bigger brushes, because it improves your brush handling technique. So you learn to make marks just more accurately and with fewer strokes, which gives, I think, good character to your painting. Okay, making it a little bit lighter as we go. These are getting slightly light as we go along. I think when I was practicing this, I was making these too light, so that the judging the tones of the objects also became too light. So I'm trying to make them a little bit darker for this. I think it's going okay so far. Keeping it lighter. Let's see, but painting around the objects is really helpful, because it then gives us sort of a value to push against, if you like, and that will help to make the rest of your tones better. So keep going here. All right, I'm going to carry on working, and I'll see you in a couple of minutes when I've finished this. All right, so I've now done the kind of background, and I've tried to keep it where it is dark. You can see in the original scene where it is dark, I've tried to keep it darker and to match those tones, the lights and darks that we were talking about earlier. And particularly you can see in the kind of shadows around the lemons, which are dark. And what I'm now going to do is to put on the blacks on the actual objects, so things like the handle for the coffee pot and the little lid bit, and also some of the bottle and some bits around the lemons as well. But put the blacks in first and then work from dark to light. That's the general sort of pattern of it. If you like palettes, then this is where we are so far, really just mixing up to the background colours. If you're wondering why we put blacks on first, the reason is because it's difficult, very difficult, to get proper blacks once you put down another lighter colour. Well, another thought, I think a lot of art is about contrast, different ways of contrasting lights and darks, different tones, different colours, complementary colours, different sort of textures, things like that. And so when you look at a painting, it's often the contrasting things that make it stand out. So let's put on some blacks. Of course, the obvious one here is around this handle. So let's put that in place. One nice tip I learned recently is if you want to put extra layers on top of existing paint, move the brush so it's more parallel to the board or paper that you're painting on. If you paint it more perpendicular at right angles to the board, you'll find the brush will drag away the paint, and so you'll actually be removing paint. But if you move it, have it more horizontal, the brush lying across the board will put more paint on top. Okay, so we'll do a bit more on that, and now let's look at this section here, which is the kind of the lid of the coffee pot. I'm going to paint this all in black, but I will be coming over it again because bits of it are not as dark as other bits. Don't try and paint the thing itself. Try and paint the shapes that you see, and then the thing, the object, will appear. It may take a little while for you to fill in more of the colours, more of the tones, but it will sort of pop out once you fill in the shapes that you see. Alright, so here you can see what I've done, put the blacks in place, and this just helps to give a bit more, well, it gets the darks down early. The next bit is I'm going to start working, I think, on the bottle, because that's the furthest away and it's also the darkest in the scene. So again, we're not going to paint the actual bottle, but we're going to paint the shapes that we see in the bottle. Alright, so I've mixed a colour here for the bottle, and it's quite dark. It's this mixture of black, the sort of slightly brownier black, and a little bit of this cadmium orange deep, which is a really lovely colour, rich colour, but it gives that sort of warmth that that bottle has got. Again, don't paint the bottle, paint the shapes that you see within the bottle. So I can see this colour up here. Get these darks down first, and they will help to define the shape, the form that we see. As I've got more confident in painting, I've got more comfortable with contrasts, so more darks and more lights, and that is what is going to create the form for this painting particularly. I'm trying to make the brush strokes mimic the shape of the bottle. So if I were to run my brush around the bottle, that's the kind of shape, the flow of the brush mark that I want on this particular painting. So imagine you're running your brush around the bottle as you do the painting. And that will also help to give it form. At this stage, don't worry, you're going to be adding more reflections. When you put the reflections on, that's when the whole thing really jumps out at you. So do not worry if it doesn't look like a bottle at this stage. Okay, that will come. It's actually a really nice moment when you put on some paint and suddenly you get this lovely bottle jumps out at you. Don't worry if it's not looking perfect, do not worry. So we've got kind of the background colour, it's like the average colour with some variation. And what we'll now do is to put on the reflection, and this is the exciting part. Alright, I've now mixed up a colour which is a bit more orange, a little bit more yellow in it, and I'm going to carefully look at section. Now this is where it starts to get a bit more important, because you're going to start making the form of the bottle using the shapes that you paint out here. I can see there's some down here, and it's up this side here. It's often when you put on these lovely highlights that the thing comes apart. So the beer bottle will suddenly come into existence, really. Well, before I go to too much detail on the bottle, I felt I should do a bit more on some of the other areas. Otherwise you could overdo this one and you might underdo the teapot, the coffee pot rather. So I've mixed up some of the greys that I'm going to use to paint the sides, starting with the darkest side first, which is this face here. Like that. Could actually be a little bit darker, so I might redo that. Just pulling it a little bit darker. And I've used this I've made the colour using black, a bit of the flake white, which is that gentler white, and a little bit of viridian, which was this sort of greeny, gentle green colour, which mixes really nicely. And that is what I've been using for this. That's better. And then tonally we've got an area down here which is similar. Again, don't paint the thing, paint the tones, paint the area of tones that you see, and then the thing will appear. So I'm going to lighten it slightly, and then paint a bit around here, which is kind of the shadow bit. There's a little bit right at the edge here. And it's important, there's a nice contrast between those two, so I'm making sure I refer to the original, the real life bit, in order to make sure I've got those tones correct. You can see at this stage I'm not being particularly sort of fussy about where the edges are and things, because we can always nudge the paint when we need to. So don't worry if it doesn't look like a coffee pot at this stage. It will. Just putting in where I see the dark bits. Do you remember when we did the bit with the blue right at the beginning, just to show us where those darker bits lay? So I'm remembering that. and you can sort of see bits of them when it comes to putting this. Sort of like that. And now we can lighten it up again a bit further and carry on. So I'm going to, we'll come back to it in a little while when I've done a bit more. So I've done quite a bit more here, just filling in, sort of blocking in, trying to get the right sort of tones here. I've done the black handle, the little lid, some of the bottle, some of the sort of shapes around there that I'm seeing in the glass. And now I'm just going to do these lemons. And once I've filled in all of the shapes, then I'll start to make sure the tones are still correct, because I can then compare them and contrast them with each of the various objects on the panel. Okay, should we keep going? There we are, I've done the lemons now around here. It's quite dark on this rear one, a bit lighter here, which I can build up the lightness here, but the back one is quite dark. So just when you if you have a go, then just think about how that lemon, it looks, how it captures the light. The last bit I'm going to do is this little stopper, and just the top of the bottle. And I'll wait to do this little sort of mechanical bit, metal fastening unit, towards the end. That's a nice highlight that we can enjoy doing right at the end. And the next bit, I think I'm going to do a bit more on the bottle. Now I've blocked in everything, I can see how it balances across the painting. We'll have fun now, just working a bit on the bottle. And now we can start to do the highlight. I've done this stopper, little sort of red rubber stopper. It's quite a nice colour actually, I like that colour. Next thing is, gosh, what's the next thing? Maybe starting to push towards the highlighting around these lemons, these little, not highlighting really, but detail around the edge of the lemon, the whiter part around here as well, and some of the segments. Some of the highlights around here, there's a little sort of a raised little sort of emblem on the bottle, which I'd like to capture. And then just define this form of the coffee pot a little bit more. It needs to be slightly darker in places, and that will help to lift it, to make it round, so it actually looks round. Tricky. Still, life is quite hard. It is hard. I think because you have this unmoving thing that you're looking at all the time, you need to step back from the painting, step away so you can see both of them together, so you see it from a distance, and that will help you to see things that need changing, and also to go away from it and come back in half an hour's time or something, and you'll see it with fresh eyes, and you'll pick out things that you like, and you'll also see things, oh, I need to change that to help get the painting looking more realistic. So I think we'll have a half-hour break, cup of tea, and we'll come back. Okay, welcome back. It's actually the next day now, so I've let this dry a little bit, and I've done a little bit more on the blocking in here. It was looking a little bit sketchy, so I've done that a little bit more. And then I've also scratched in here, I did this yesterday, scratched in some of the lines on the teapot. It's quite a nice technique whereby you can expose the sort of stark white background of the primed board, and you get a sharp point. I don't know if you saw the last video, but I had sharpened some of these just in a pencil sharpener, and then I can use that and scribe a line down, and it scrapes away the oil paint that I put on and shows the white, and that represents quite nicely those reflections that catch the angles of the coffee pot. And what I'm going to do now is actually to put on some of the reflections on this bottle. I'm not going to try and paint the bottle, I'm going to try and paint the reflections. So we'll see how it goes. They'll look strange as you paint them, okay, so don't worry. Right, I've mixed up this very pale blue. It's with titanium white and ultramarine. And I can see that there's some up here. Again, just try and paint the reflections that you see. A little bit more paint, so I'm being quiet because I'm concentrating. It's incredibly tempting to draw what you think it should look like, rather than looking at the actual thing and drawing these weird shapes that you see. But keep persevering, and then it will, hopefully it will kind of, you will see it, and suddenly you think, oh yes, it does look like a bottle, even though I've drawn these weird shapes. They can really make a big difference, those tiny, tiny little bits. Right, so now I'm going to I've mixed up a little colour to try and do bits of these lemon. And they're quite dark actually, the lemons. They look dark now, but I think when I put in a bit of this, they will help again to sort of bring them to life. And I'm quite pleased with the bottle. That's kind of worked, I think. But for now, I'm going to do these. I'm using my hand, probably seen as like a rest. That's really effective because then you can move it around with the brush to get this sort of circle on the lemon. And this only works because I made the lemon, the background bit here, dark. If you don't make it dark, then these lights don't stand out. And that's the thing you find. I was saying about contrast, and in order to make something look bright, you've got to have something next to it that's dark. You can't just keep painting lighter and lighter. You can only go so far with the oil paint. But to make it look brighter, you've got to have something very dark next to it. And the lighter you want it, the darker you have to go. A little bit there that gets in the light as well. I do like these detailed sections, because you just need to put a few tiny little marks on them. And the kind of the worries of the blocky in stage go. Anyway, enough about lemons. I'll finish this one off. Okay, so there we are. I've put in a few things. I put in a slightly darker shadow around here and onto the coffee pot. So it gives them a bit more context, kind of realism, makes them look more 3D, I think. And then I've done the detail of the segments and a little bit of highlighting just where the lemon's a bit wet. Yeah, the sort of glossy look you get, and the same on this one. Alright, so bottle, lemons, let's do the coffee pot next. And I think we'll make that a little bit darker, particularly on the lower section, and a bit fuller. It's a bit sketchy on the top. I need to make it a slightly deeper colour. And then the handle, that'll be nice. Do the handle. And then little highlights on this handle here, but also this bit up here. Should be fun. I've darkened the coffee pot a bit more, and I've also darkened part of the lemon. You can see the front lemon. I didn't think it was dark enough, it was too light. And it meant that I wasn't seeing enough of these sections. So it's got to be dark behind it to allow the segment sections to show up. What I'm going to do now is, it's got dark out here, but we're going to press on. I think. I'll do a bit more tomorrow. I won't finish it this evening, but I'm going to do a little bit of the highlighting along the ridge of the lid, and sorry, I went very quiet for that. I have this phrase my daughter and I had used, which is underwater painting, which is basically where you hold your breath. And that's it. You don't speak, and you're just focusing on doing the painting. Now this isn't too dark. It's not too light, rather, at this stage. I will be adding some more highlights. I'm not going to go straight for the sort of bright highlights. I'm going to build it up. Now you can kind of nudge it down with oil paint. Alright, I've mixed up this nice black, and what I want to show you is this sort of technique I learnt from an artist, Bristol-based artist called Tom Hughes. Tom Hughes, and he's got this sort of contraption which I've made as well, which allows you to hook this end, which is just like a bolt put through an aluminium bar. It allows you to put that against the side of the easel, and you can then use this to act as a ruler. So when you need to paint some straight lines or get a nice horizontal, you can use it and just run your brush along it like that. It makes nice straight lines. I don't overuse it because I think it can make the painting, it looks too mechanical, these straight lines. I think it's nice to have some personality in the painting. But for things like this, where it's nice to have a precise line, they are particularly good. So I'm just going to line it up with a real object, and then I think I can run it along here. It's just under the highlight I've just put on. Checking again, hold it up, and then get a bit more paint on the brush. And put it in. And then the final one, which is an angle like that. More brush, a bit more paint on the brush. Alright, now I'm going to do a bit more on the handle, I think, of the coffee pot. I've mixed up, again, when you go to the lights, don't go immediately, don't just put a little blob of white on the handle. You can build it up. So I've got a sort of greyish colour, which there's a nice little highlight just on there. Okay, that's catching the light really nicely. There's also a little one there. Just a very slight one. It's onto this little tiny little bit can make the difference. Right, and now I put this on, and now I am going to put almost pure white, not the titanium white. I'm just going to use this flake white, which is kind of a pretend lead white. It's like I think I mentioned earlier. It's a bit more transparent than titanium white. Titanium white is very, very opaque. You just can't, you put it, mix it with other paints and you can't see through it at all to the board or to paint underneath. This flake white is a little bit more transparent. And it's kind of like a gentler white. I quite like it, but it's lovely actually for certain things. It mixes more easily with other paints. Makes a sort of smoother consistency. There we are. Has that popped? It has for me. Just looks, again, like a handle now. You can kind of hold it much more. This is fun, this bit. This really is fun. I'm quite pleased with this. Yeah, I'm quite pleased. As I said, you go through a sort of process with paintings where you have initial huge optimism. you've got this blank canvas, you can do anything with it, and then you get a bit stuck and you hit the challenges of the painting, and then you start thinking, oh, this is terrible, it's not going to work out, and you think, oh gosh, I can't even paint properly, and then you do sometimes just a couple of tiny strokes, and I mean I was quite pleased with that. That was a nice sort of uplifting moment where you just touch it on the panel, on the board, and it suddenly kind of zings and it sings to you, and it's a lovely moment. So I think we're through the slough of despond with this painting, and we're into the home straight, which is a very, very nice period of painting. It's exciting, but I do need to slow down because the tiniest change can make quite a big difference at this stage. So I will do that. Let's mix up a black. Right, I've mixed up a black, and now we're going to paint the actual, I don't know what you call it, the handle on the lid of the coffee pot. Again, I'm going to support my hand thus, and so this is like a greater angle, this bit. He said, using positive dialogue, when in doubt, just ask yourself questions. Don't say, that's not right. Just say, should that be more of an angle, less of an angle, lighter, darker? That's a bit better. And then this base section. Let's pause there. I think it's probably time to go in, and we'll carry on tomorrow. I've done a little bit more now, a bit more highlights on the lemon and the bottle and the coffee pot. I think I'm ready now to do I'm going to do the mechanical sort of bit, the bit that fastens this stopper, the sort of metal linkage that goes from here down to here, which I will paint. I'm going to paint the dark bit first, and then I'll run a highlight down that, maybe a low mid light, and then a highlight to capture the light that's coming in. And I've also lightened the skin of the lemon here where it captures the light, and that brings them forward, making them brighter and warmer. Alright, I've mixed up a darkish colour, maybe black, a bit of grey added in. And I'm going to carefully paint. I think it's going to start the hole here, which it will come from. And there's also a hole just here that it will go to. Really have to look at the way it's actually made up, so I've actually peered over and had a look at the way the bottle is working. It'll look a bit weird to begin with, but then once the other bits go on, and particularly when we put the highlights in, that's really when it works. And then I want to paint down to there. So as I paint that line, which is almost a straight line, from there, I need to concentrate on that end point, and that will guide me as I paint, he said. So I'm going to do some underwater painting now. And then there's another one that comes down from here and ends up at that point there. So again, I can come down from here I can aim for that. Okay, that's all right. Right, I'll mix up another colour now. We'll add some mid-light and then the highlight. Really only when the highlight goes on that you'll suddenly snap. Like, oh yeah. Oh, maybe not. But what you can do is to get a brush here, which you dip in white spirit, and then you get almost all that white spirit off. And what you can then do is to nudge that paint. Look, you see that little bit there? I'm going to try and nudge that in. Like that. And then clean it straight away, otherwise you'll end up smearing paint. And then like that. And then when I put the highlight on there, it'll just go over that few inches. There. Like that. Okay. So now we're going to do the highlight, and I hope that will then sort of snap it into life. Like that. And then also one like that. Just keep looking at what you're painting. And just paint exactly what you see. Don't think, oh gosh, this looks a bit weird. Paint exactly what you see. And I promise you it will emerge. Like a butterfly. And just keep looking and painting what you see. I'm really sort of steadying my hand here. My hand on the base and then my thumb on my wrist. Just keeps it all in sync. There, I've put a little bit of highlights around here, and there's just one little bit I think I need to do now, which is just around the top of this bottle. There. You can tweak it all day long, but I think I'm quite happy with that. I think I'm going to sign it. That might do. So, there we are. Well, I hope you've enjoyed that episode of Ready to Paint, doing a still life. What I recommend is just to do a quick, if you're going to try this, before you do your kind of final piece, just have a go at doing a quick one. Here's one I did the day before I started doing this one. It's quite basic, there's not much detail, and it's not brilliant, but it did give me a lot of good tips about where I could expect some difficulties, where some of the challenges were, where some of the tones surprised me as I was painting. So really recommend doing that if you can. But for now, I hope you enjoyed this as much as I did, and I will see you again. But for now, always be ready to paint.